For part 1 of our lab, here we have our RC circuit output plot. We see here the 10K ohm resistor in blue. The capacitor charges up much quicker than the 100K resistor in red. This is because the larger resistor doesn't have as much current moving through the circuit, so the flow of voltage to the capacitor is much less, causing it to take more time to charge up fully. What we see as the time increases, the two do meet up at the fully charged 5 volts as time continues and the capacitors become saturated. So here we have our Arduino code set up with our resistor and capacitor variables and our tau, which is for an RC circuit, resistance time capacitance. We have our 5-second delay, which is to discharge the capacitor fully before the loop starts. To get the loop timing right, we set up 2 for loops, one for setting the pin high and one for low. We go through this for loop 500 times so that we can get the timing of 10 tau delay between setting it high and low. At each delay of tau over 50, we read the V input and the capacitor input. So here in the serial monitor, we can see that starting at 0, the capacitor will charge up while the pin is set high. And when the pin is set low, we can see that it will start discharging. So for the 100K ohm resistor, all we did was change in our code the resistance variable from 10K to 100K. And here in our serial monitor, we can see that the V capacitor input will increase to about this 640, 670 range, and then it will start discharging back down to about down here at this 488, 490 range. For the 10K volt resistor, we can see that the capacitor voltage will more fully fill up towards that 5 volt range and decrease down closer to the 0 volt. This is because the resistance is lower, causing more voltage to flow through the circuit. For the 100K ohm resistor, we can see that the input voltage from the capacitor is staying within this 3.25 to about 2.5 volt range. This is because the time constant is short enough to not allow the capacitor to fully or more fully charge and discharge. For my Arduino code, I took the provided code and I added 3 sections of code. First, to create the lines, I create a for loop to create 6 evenly spaced lines at intervals of 102. I create a for loop to create the labels using text commands, and then I created the legend using 2 text commands, 2 fill commands, and 2 ellipse commands. So here we have our processing code all graphed out on MATLAB with the 10K resistor data on the left and the 100K resistor on the right. We can see on the left it looks a lot like our processing code where it will charge up very high, almost close to that 5 volts when the input voltage is high, and then discharge all the way back down to about that 0.5 volt range when the input voltage is low. So we see this is what we expected when we looked at our processing graph. And then looking at the 100K ohm, we see that it comes up and peaks about that 3.25 volt range. And it does, because it doesn't get up to that high 5 volts like the 10K, because the amount of time it's given to charge and discharge is much lower. So that's why it only gets up to this about 3.25 and discharges to about 2.5 range. For the second part of our lab, we changed our circuit around to replace the capacitor with a thermistor. With this thermistor, we're going to look at how it changes the resistance in the circuit through changing the temperature from room temperature it is at currently, heating it up, and cooling it down. So here I have our processing screen showing the voltage at room temperature, which I recorded at 21.7 degrees Celsius. So here I'm going to wrap my fingers around the thermistor, heating it up, and you can see that the voltage slowly decreases towards that 2 volt range depending on how hot my fingers are. So after letting the thermistor come to room temperature, I'm now going to hold an ice cube against it to show how the voltage of the thermistor will change with cold temperatures. We can see here that the input voltage from the thermistor is increasing slowly towards that 3 volt line, while when it was hot, it was decreasing towards the 2 volt line.